Baby boomers are reaching retirement age in droves, and millions of them are broke. Not a little behind schedule broke, I mean flat out broke. And after working with retirees for over 20 years, I can tell you that this didn't happen by accident. According to the Federal Reserve, about 43% of Americans aged 55 to 64 have absolutely nothing saved for retirement. And even for the boomers who did save, the numbers are still shockingly low. So the real question is, how did the generation that had everything end up here? Well, since 1985, the share of Americans over 65 who are still working has doubled from 10.8% to 20.2%. And what makes this so strange is that boomers are the generation everyone says had it all. Cheap college, affordable housing, stable jobs, and decades of a booming stock market and economic growth. So how did America's luckiest generation end up retiring broke? Because boomers didn't just wake up at 65 with nothing, this was decades in the making. Let's dive in. Most people talk about retirement like it's been around forever, but it hasn't. Retirement is actually a modern concept that's less than 100 years old. For most of human history, there was no retirement. You worked until you died. Or, if you were lucky, your family took care of you at the very end. The first major sign of retirement showed up in 1875 when American Express created one of the very first private pension plans. But it wasn't for the average worker, it was mainly for executives. Retirement didn't become a real option for normal Americans until 1935 when FDR signed the Social Security Act. And by 1940, the first Social Security checks were sent out. Boomers were born right after Social Security started. And they were also born during the post-war boom, when pensions were common. Their parents were the first generation that could realistically retire. And boomers assumed they'd follow the same roadmap. Work hard, get a pension, pay into Social Security, and retire at 65. But that system didn't last. Today, retirement planning feels straightforward. People are told to start investing early, open a 401k, invest in index funds, and hold them for decades. That's basically the modern blueprint. But when boomers started working, none of that existed. In 1966, the oldest boomers were turning 20, but the 401k wasn't created until 1978. Index funds, they didn't exist until 1978 either. And the Roth IRA, that didn't appear until 1998. Back then, there were no apps, no online brokers, and no easy way to invest. If you did want to invest, you had to call a broker, pay huge fees, and often pick individual stocks. Most young adults just avoided it entirely. It was too complex. So boomers relied on the only system they understood, pensions and Social Security. But early in their careers, they began realizing that pensions weren't guaranteed. Here's a part of the story that younger investors don't fully understand. Most younger investors grew up seeing the market rise. Other than slight dips during COVID, people assume the stock market is a reliable wealth-building machine. Put money in, wait long enough, and it grows. But boomers didn't see that. Boomers entered adulthood during one of the worst stretches of stock market performance in modern history. From 1966 to 1982, the stock market went literally nowhere for 16 straight years. And if you factor in inflation, investors actually lost money. If a 20-year-old boomer invested $1,000 in 1966, by 1982 it would be worth around $500 after inflation. That's not a good first impression. That's the type of experience that makes you believe the stock market is a scam, and that belief spread so much that Business Week literally ran a cover story titled "The Death of Equities," basically saying stocks were dead as an investment. So boomers grew up with the idea that the market wasn't trustworthy, and then, right when they were starting to distrust it, the retirement system forced them into it anyway. By the late 1970s, pensions were fading. One reason was the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, ERISA. It was designed to protect pensions, but it also made them expensive for companies to maintain. So employers started looking for a way out, and that way out arrived in 1978 through a small tax provision known as the 401k. It was originally meant for executives, but in the early 1980s, someone realized that it could be used for everyone. Workers could contribute their own money, employers can match it, and the funds could grow tax-deferred until retirement. At first, the 401k was marketed as something extra, but companies quickly realized it could replace pensions entirely. And when they did that, the risk of retirement shifted from the employer to the employee. Suddenly, your retirement wasn't guaranteed anymore. It depended on whether you contributed enough and whether the stock market cooperated. But participation was messy early on. People didn't understand the system. Many cashed out when they switched jobs, and others borrowed against their accounts. And financial education barely existed at that point. The cruel irony is that the generation that trusted the market the least became the first generation that was forced to rely on it for retirement. When you start looking at the full story, boomers didn't fail because they were irresponsible. They got hit with three major disadvantages. The first was terrible timing. They entered adulthood during a 16-year market stagnation. That shaped their entire view of investing and delayed their willingness to participate. The second was trusting the old system. Boomers assumed that pensions and Social Security would carry them like it did for their parents. But pensions faded away while they were still early in their careers, and many didn't adjust fast enough. And the third and most damaging was missing early compounding. Investing rewards time more than anything else. Starting early is everything, but boomers missed those early growth years because the market stagnated, and many delayed investing even longer because they didn't trust it. So for the first half of their adult lives, they were behind. But then everything changed in the 1980s. From 1982 to 2000, the stock market entered one of the biggest bull runs in history. The Dow rose from around 800 to over 11,000. Suddenly, boomers watched the market rise year after year, and what once looked like a scam started to look like a wealth-building machine. By the late 1980s and 90s, 401ks became mainstream. Employers offered matches, investing became pop culture, CNBC launched, financial magazines exploded, and by the 90s, the media was celebrating the new success story, the 401k millionaire. This is when boomers finally jumped in. But there was one problem. They were already older. By 1990, the oldest boomers were 44. Their early compounding years, those were gone. And they were juggling mortgages and kids and rising expenses. So of course, they took on extra risk trying to catch up. They loaded up on high-growth internet stocks and rode the boom. For the first time, they believed they cracked the code. But that's when the market hit them with a 1-2 punch. By 2000, markets were at record highs. From 1980 to 2000, the Dow rose 285%, and the Nasdaq skyrocketed more than 1,000%. It looked like the formula for retirement was simple. Invest in the stock market and watch it multiply. But retirement was now completely dependent on the market. And in 2000, the dot-com bubble burst. The oldest boomers were 54, nearing retirement age, with a lot of their savings invested. The Nasdaq collapsed by 78% over the next 2 years. And the Dow fell 38%. Many boomers saw their 401ks turn into 201ks. And if that wasn't enough, just as the market began recovering, they were hit again in 2008 with the Great Recession. By then, the oldest boomers were 62, right at retirement age. Home prices fell around 27%. The stock market was cut in half and unemployment spiked up. Many boomers panicked and sold their investments at the worst possible time. But boomers didn't just lose money. They lost the timing they needed to retire. Many had no choice but to keep working. And younger boomers watched their savings collapse while also struggling to find stable work. For a lot of people, these weren't just crashes, they were life-changing events. Now, after the 2008 Great Recession, boomers were in their late 50s and 60s. Retirement wasn't a future plan anymore, it was now. But many didn't have enough saved. By 2010, the median retirement account balance was about $100,000, which only produces about $333 a month under the 4% rule. And many had much less than that. At that stage of life, there wasn't enough time left for compounding to do its magic. Expenses were still high, wages stagnated, job security was shaky, and boomers were left trying to patch together retirement by working longer, downsizing, delaying Social Security, or picking up part-time work. Now, in 2026, boomers are between 61 and 79 years old, and many are stuck in the worst possible situation. They're too old to get hired for career-level jobs, but too broke to actually retire. Many are being pushed out of higher paying work and forced into low wage jobs like driving Uber or working in retail because Social Security alone isn't enough to cover modern living costs. And that's why the share of Americans over 65 still working has doubled since 1985. Retirement has turned into survival mode for a lot of people. And boomers are often seen as the generation that had everything. But when you look at their full story, it's clear that they weren't just irresponsible. They were shaped by economic shifts, policy changes, and crashes that happen at the worst possible times. And the biggest lesson here is that financial stories are never simple. The world changes, the system changes, and the rules can shift in ways you don't expect. Just because something works today doesn't mean it'll work the same way 25 years from now. The second lesson is that the stock market isn't always a straight line upward. Some generations experience long bull runs. Others experience stagnation and crashes. A lot of investing success comes down to timing and luck. And the final lesson is this: save responsibly, invest wisely, but don't wait until 65 to start living, because retirement is not guaranteed. Markets crash, health fades, and time moves faster than you think. Retirement isn't the destination of life, it's just one chapter. And when you really step back and look at this, boomers didn't fail. They were playing a game where the rules kept changing. And that's the part that I want to take away from this. Because if you're planning for retirement today, you're not just planning based on what works right now. You're planning for a future where things will change again. Tax laws will change, markets will change, even the role of Social Security could change. And that's why the biggest mistake I see today is people assuming that the current system will still be there for them in 20 or 30 years. So the question becomes, are you building a retirement plan that works today, or one that can survive when things don't go according to plan? Because in the next video, I'm going to walk you through the exact strategy that I use with clients to build retirement income that doesn't depend on everything going right.